Okay. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you for
Good.
coming on the show.
Absolutely.
So, you're here to promote your book, Draw on the Way. I see the book cover behind you.
Da-da-da.
And this is a book of sketches. Is that right?
It is a book filled with sketches, but the book itself is equal parts, I'd say, inspiration and instruction about how to draw from life, so observational drawing, and it's about how to draw on the way. So wherever you are, how to pick up a pen and a sketchbook and make some art.
Oh, I see. So it's drawing as well as instruction.
Yeah, yeah. So I spent kind of 10 years, I'm self-taught, and I spent the last 10 years basically learning how to draw. I started drawing on the New York subway, which is how I learned how to draw. Very traditional art school, the subway. And so I have been sharing and creating art that way for about 10 years now. And then I was asked to write a book about how to do that, to share it with other folks. So that's what's in the book.
How difficult is it to teach someone how to draw? I mean, doesn't somebody have to have sort of some innate talent built in at birth?
I think, it's a great question. And I think we are all sort of told that from an early age. Like somewhere along the line, somebody tells you whether you're good at being creative. And I am a big believer that the inherent talent is you. So like everybody has their own unique point of view. Everybody has their own unique way of creating. And I think if you nurture that and believe in that, then you have talent. And I say that really as somebody who's kind of done both sides of the coin. So I was a professional opera singer. That was my first career. And I studied, I went to graduate school, performed all over the world. And whenever I would tell people I'm a singer, the first thing people would say is, "Oh, I can't sing. I can't sing at all. I'm terrible." My choir teacher told me to mouth the words. And it always made me really sad. I was like, if you can make sound, you can sing. And so I would always kind of encourage people like to not take that joy away from themselves because they're not experts at it or professionals at it. And so when I came to drawing, I'm totally self-taught and I kind of embraced that and just sort of decided I'm going to see what happens if I just let myself kind of go and just see where I end up and what my style is. And I'm not going to kind of look to somebody else to tell me how or what is good. So yeah, so that I think I really believe anybody can learn how to draw because I think a lot of it is actually just tapping into the things that you already know how to do.
Well, I think to some degree, drawing is technique like writing. I think with practice, you can get better and you can learn skill. It's a lot of muscular memory. I'm not so sure with other forms of creativity, but that's a whole nother discussion for another show. You mentioned opera singing. I want to go back to that. How did you get involved in opera singing?
I am naturally loud and attention seeking.
Oh, good answer. Okay.
So, and I also like I kind of describe myself as a really talented third grader. I like to sing, I like to write, and I like to draw. So I was always really musical, and I had a very naturally operatic voice, so kind of natural vibrato and a naturally big sound. So when I decided I wanted to kind of pursue that, it was easier than it might have been because I was just sort of had a natural skill for it, I would say, an interest.
How much demand is there for opera singers?
There's more than you would think. um, yeah, there's more than you would think. You could certainly be pretty busy doing that. But it's a hard career, and in part, like in America, especially to be an opera singer, you travel a lot because you're going to go to Opera Omaha for 6 weeks, and then you got to go to Detroit Opera House for 4 weeks for a show. So you're on the road all the time. In Europe, they have like a house system in a lot of places where you can just kind of like get a job and you're just like the resident. So it's a little less travel based and a little bit less chaotic, but here it's definitely a lot of travel.
So places like Italy and Austria, you could just be the resident opera
Yeah,
singer. Yeah.
yeah, to a certain degree, yeah. Not everywhere, but it's a bit more common there. So yeah, and for me, that was a big part of why I ended up not singing, deciding to kind of, I was having a pretty successful career, but kind of the more successful I was with singing, the more unhappy I was, because I was never home. And I was, it makes it hard to have friendships and relationships, and, just you're never in where you live. So that was a ironically, because now I travel a lot for this as well, but
Okay.
big part of me switching careers.
I had another guy on who was an opera singer who changed his career after a very successful career as an opera singer, and he went to selling real estate. So I forget his name. You might know him. Is it a tight circle? This was in New York.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It is, because it's such a niche thing. It is. It is a tight circle, and actually, that's a really common transition. I know a lot of singers who became
Real
real estate
estate?
people.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think it's because we're naturally personable, and there's kind of a performative element to it. So, and even for me, I remember when I was kind of transitioning from opera into my second act, which was a career in marketing. I worked as a temp, and I remember contacting the temp agency, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're an opera singer? We love opera singers. You guys are the best temps. Like everybody loves you." And you're like really responsible. So that was a strange advantage when I was kind of making that transition.
Well, you wouldn't think that opera singing would be connected with anything, but he sort of used, and I forget now because it was a few months ago, but there was something about opera that he learned how to transition that into real estate, like in the way that creating space. He wasn't a real estate broker, he was a real estate designer.
Oh, interesting.
I cannot remember what the connection was, but there was some sort of an artistic, creative connection between his
Yeah.
opera singing and the spaces he was designing.
I can imagine that. I mean, it's funny. I feel like there's funny ways that you sort of find these like through lines. Like I could imagine for him, maybe it's like, you're around a lot of set decoration as a singer. So maybe you get kind of a flair for that. But like for myself, like drawing is my third career. Being an illustrator and an author is my third career. And I kind of looking back, I feel like what drew me to singing, in addition to being loud and liking being on stage, is it's a form of storytelling, and sort of bringing people into your world and showing them something or convincing them of something. And you have to find all these ways to sort of be compelling. And I think I love doing that as a singer. I ended up going into marketing, and that's how I kind of like sold myself when I was in marketing, was like, hey, I tell stories on stage. Like I can do this in any medium. And that's kind of what marketing is. And now I see, my drawings, I really see them as stories. So they're like quick, notes that I'm sort of jotting down in the moment, but I'm doing that with the purpose of telling a story from kind of a moment in time. So I think it's funny the ways that like these through lines of who we are and what we want to do in the world show up, in these different places.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's very interesting how everything is sort of connected in a strange sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
I started out as a musician and then was studying acting. And now I've been doing radio for many years, and now we're on a video show. Who knew the internet was coming? It just, it opened up a whole new world for us. Yeah, it was great.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me go back to drawing a little bit. Now, I am one of these people who cannot draw at all. I just can't. I can play the piano, I can sing, I can play guitar, but drawing is something I've never been able to do. If you wanted to teach me some basics, where do you start with somebody who has essentially a clean slate?
Yeah. Well, I would start with the mindset. And I certainly do that in the book. Because I think when, again, kind of like so many of us are taught at some point that we're not good at this. And so I feel like there first has to be sort of a shift, at least to sort of saying, okay, I might not be the best at drawing, but that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to do it. And that doesn't mean I won't surprise myself or create something good. So I feel like there has to be sort of like this shift, to just allow yourself to surprise yourself. And then I think there's so many different ways to sort of go into the door of creativity. And I think, again, a lot of us sort of go into that door of like perfectionism, like it has to be the best. And I've got to take like lessons and I have to have 77 books to show me how to do this. And I'm just a big believer of like, actually there's all these different ways to kind of enter into your own creativity. So like instinct is one of them. So a lot of times when I teach classes, and the first exercise that is in the book are blind contour drawings, which is a drawing that you do without looking at the page. So you actually have no control over what you're doing, what it looks like while you're doing it. And the purpose of that is just getting people to kind of focus on the process and realizing that, you know, when you can't judge what you're doing, it's actually way more fun to do at first. And secondly, kind of tapping into those instincts that like your hand actually has a lot of intelligence. So if you just kind of bypass that critical control center of the brain that's kind of telling you all of these things that you have to do and you need to do, and you kind of let your instincts lead the way, people are always surprised at what they make. So that would be kind of where I would start with you, is say like, let's get into the process and focus on that. Also tapping into emotion and storytelling, like stopping, you know, not evaluating your drawings, your work as, is this the best drawing that's ever been made in the history of the universe? Which is sort of a weird question to ask of what you're making, but rather to say like, does this tell a story? Does this make me feel the way I felt when I was inspired to draw this? And if you start asking those different kind of questions, I think it's much easier to evaluate your work as worthy or worthwhile. Even if you're just like, I had 3 minutes where I wasn't thinking about that other thing that was stressing me out. So this was a good use of my time.
Okay, well, art is very subjective, certainly. And, you know, to me, if I see somebody who can sketch, like I'm looking at the pictures behind you there, you know, they look very good because I know what they are. I know what they're supposed to represent, right?
Yes.
Abstract art where you just see a lot of blobs of color on a canvas, all right, it looks all right, but, you know, what is it? And then, you know, what is art? I mean, Andy Warhol made art out of a Campbell's soup can, right?
Yep.
So
yep.
my definition of not being able to draw means I can't draw something that looks like what it's supposed to be. If I make a face, it's going to look like a happy face. You know, it doesn't have much detail and much depth. If I try to draw a vase of flowers, it's going to look probably more like thistles or, you know, sticks or something. So,
yeah.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a photograph of what it is that you're trying to represent.
No, not at all. And I'm so glad you said that, because that is something. So I very early on when I started drawing, I said I learned how to draw on the New York City subway. So I would just draw on my commute to work. And I started doing it. And I started with the belief like, I cannot draw from real life and I can't draw people. I knew those two things for a fact. And now that's all I do all day professionally. But very early on, I was drawing and I was loving the process of drawing, but then I would kind of look at these drawings and I'm like, this doesn't look like that person. Like, it wasn't a success. And I started feeling really frustrated, and to the point where I was like, you know, I think I should just stop doing this. Like, I'm not very good. And I kind of had this epiphany. I was an art history major in undergrad, and I kind of had this epiphany of like, well, there's all these different ways and reasons to create art. Like we celebrate, you know, Da Vinci and Picasso and Rembrandt and Michelangelo and Pollock because they created a version of the world as they see it. And so it's not, art is not about recreating the world with perfect fidelity. And I think a lot of us learned that at some point, that it's got to always be representational. If you're drawing your dog, it's got to look just like your dog. And, you know, when you kind of look at some of the most famous artists throughout time, Van Gogh, you know, the world doesn't look like Van Gogh painted it, but it feels that way. And so I think if you kind of, again, so I had this kind of epiphany of like, I'm going to find my own style, my own way, and I'm going to tap into the sensation, the feeling. Like, again, like when I finish a drawing, it's like, does that, like, I have a drawing here just like that I kind of pulled out as an example. This is a quick sketch that I made on the subway earlier this year. And it's like, it's not,
oh yeah.
You know, it's not a perfect drawing, right? It's not like, it didn't spend hours on this, and that's pretty obvious, but you know, it's a moment in time. Like for me, when I look at this, I was riding the subway. It's the middle of COVID. The subway's abandoned. It's feeling very desolate, very isolated, very disconnected. And here's this person wearing a hoodie and a mask and sort of in this sort of like, not depressed, but like kind of, quiet posture. And it's like, to me, that's the story of where New York was in that moment. It's like, we're disconnected, we're isolated, it's quiet in this place that's supposed to be full and bustling. So when I go into, make a drawing with that mindset, when I feel that, when I look at it again, I'm like, that's art to me, is recreating a sensation or a feeling or a story. And the fidelity to reality is secondary.
Well, the second you put that up on the screen, I felt the isolation. I felt the sort of despair coming from that individual.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
That's exactly what I felt. I knew what it was. It was good enough that, yeah, it's a guy sitting there with a hoodie on the subway. But the emotion was what hit me first.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do have to wrap this up. We are out of time. We ran a little over, but no problem. Do you have a website you want to give out?
I do. I'm drawnontheway.com, and I'm Drawn on the Way on all social media. And I love to meet new folks through drawing. So say hello.
Okay, great. Sarah, thanks so much for coming on. It was nice meeting you, nice chatting with you. Best of luck with your book.